Welcome to the We Win in Injury Law podcast. I'm Tyler Todd, your host, sitting here with my co-host, Jaron, the Snow Canyon Man Sandberg. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tyler.
You know what? I feel like we were going to start today's podcast with a little Karen Reed update because we're also going to dive into the Idaho 4 murder trial that's scheduled, I think, start in August. But I feel like every time I give a really good afternoon, I feel like I kind of need a Ryan Reynolds update.
Yeah.
And Blake Lively.
Well, I wish that case was moving quicker.
Well, yeah. I mean, everybody who kind of wants some resolution will find out what's going to happen and who's going to bail out or who's going to give up or who's going to throw in the towel. I feel like no one's really doing anything because they're doing what their lawyers have told them to do, which is like, shut up.
Yeah.
Right? Don't put anything out there on social media because we haven't heard anything.
Yeah. It's the bad publicity is over for at least a minute because there's not a whole lot going on.
No, and we just watched one of Blake Lively's movies over the weekend, and I don't know. I mean, I was kind of like, she's a victim, which I still think she is. She just kind of has a weird vibe, even like in her movies. I know she's acting, but I don't know. And I think her most recent movie, Another Simple Favor, also has some weird shade throwing at Baldoni. Which is kind of what Deadpool was, right? The most recent Deadpool, you had Ryan Reynolds throwing mad shade at Baldoni via Deadpool, and I think she just did it via Another Simple Favor.
Well, and it was.
Have you heard about any of that?
Well, I didn't watch a ton of it, but it almost like was surprising the movie came out. Like it kind of came out quickly. I didn't feel like there was a lot of fanfare, even though you'd think it would have been bigger because of how hot that news is on this case.
Yeah, Look, I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think. I really do think there was some major shade being thrown at Baldoni via Another Simple Favor, via Blake Lively. And maybe she's not as innocent as I was maybe giving her a little bit of credit in another previous podcast that we did. Putting most of the blame on Ryan Reynolds, which I still think it's appropriate.
Yeah.
Because I just don't like him. I mean, you guys know that. I think he's not funny. And I think that he's been kind of controlling her.
Or at least it seems that way, right?
And it seems that way. But I think that Blake's not as innocent as I was trying to give her credit, to be honest.
Well, and sometimes like when you see him act post what you think of him in the media, it changes even how you view the movie. I saw Amber Heard in it's not Marvel, it's DC with where she's like the underwater. Why am I drawing a blank on
We're
the
in the
name?
middle of a podcast. Why are you drawing a blank?
I don't know. But she was in, oh my gosh.
No idea what you're talking about.
It's like her only famous movie where she's in
She's famous?
Amber. It's like her one big movie.
I thought she became famous because of the trial with Johnny Depp.
Oh my gosh. What is the name of the movie? Aquaman. We got some help from our producers over here. In Aquaman, now I look at her like with even more of like a disdain. Even though maybe the first time I saw it with my kids, I was a little more like, okay, this movie is what it is. But I think after watching her in that trial, it made me scrutinize her acting even more. Do you think a little bit of that?
That's fair. That could have been something that I was doing for sure.
So watching A Simple Favor, is it Another Simple Favor? What's the name of the second one?
Another Simple Favor.
Another Simple
The
Favor.
first one's A Simple Favor.
Do you feel like were you analyzing her differently given everything that's came out?
Fair. I mean, probably. But I was trying to be objective. I was trying to be unbiased to see if we could really enjoy the movie. And no. I mean,
no.
Anna Kendrick's in it. And so I think she's fantastic. And I actually think she's really funny. I don't know. I was trying to be objective.
And it's like we try to talk with potential jurors. Biases are okay. We all have biases, right? I mean, we all come to the table with certain biases.
Well, and you come with it, and you make a good point because you come with certain perspective, right?
Yeah.
And preconceived maybe notions or ideas based on history or knowledge of things you've seen or heard or read about. And so, yeah, you have an immediate bias towards someone or something, which is why jury selection is so important in jury trials and who your plaintiff is, right?
Yeah.
Because if you have a plaintiff or a client, in our case, right, that a potential jury may not like, then you're automatically kind of behind the eight ball.
Yeah.
And if you perceive a person to be kind of like not likable, then that's going to be a challenge because the jury may not like them.
Yeah.
And they're going to come with their biases and their perceptions and their different perspectives on things. And so you kind of have to weed that out.
And we've had that conversation amongst ourselves on certain clients. Like, they would be terrible in front of a jury. I mean, it happens.
Yeah.
And normally we hear from these clients, I'm very likable. And as soon as someone tells you that, you're like instantly...
In your mind, you're like, are you?
Are you? And maybe that's from us working with them, like they've been paying to work with or something. But we do hear that from clients sometimes, and we have to make that judgment call of, how do you tell a client that they would be terrible as a witness? Now, some clients know. We had one client that I remember for a deposition, you were prepping him. He was nervous. And the very first question was, what's your name? And he said, I can't recall.
I don't recall. We're like, oh, shoot. No, that's all right. That looked well rehearsed. Yeah. I mean, if you've ever had your deposition taken, anyone listening or watching, if you've ever had your deposition taken, it can be tough because you're on the hot seat. And it's a process that a lot of times the defense and defense lawyers will use and go through because, they want to ask the questions and there might be some information they're not aware of and they want to hone that in a little bit more. But more oftentimes than not, they're doing it to kind of judge you.
Yeah.
They're doing it to see how you're going to present to a jury. Because if they don't like you or think that you may not present well, they're going to presume that they know what the jury will likely think. And then they're reporting back to the insurance company, hey, this person didn't present well at the deposition.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to try this case. Or this person presented really well, very likable, very sincere, believable. You might want to really increase the value that you're offering because that person's going to be really good at trial.
Yeah, and I think there's been times when we've had cases settled before the defendant deposition where I think, as the attorney probably did the prep with the defendant,
same thing.
They were thinking, oh my gosh, we can't let this guy be deposed or it'll increase the case offer.
Absolutely. And that's a good point to go kind of jump into the Karen Reed update because I kind of feel like they're dealing with the same issue with her, whether she's likable or not, and whether the jury is going to like her. In fact, one of the text messages from Proctor, one of the investigating officers, and it's weird. I mean, it is weird. You guys have been following this trial. It's weird. The text messages between the different officers about Karen Reed is super weird because they're kind of going back and forth like, hey, is she hot? Is she a babe? Or something like that. And
did I find any nudes in her phone?
And then one responded, yeah, she's a babe, but she has a really weird accent. And I think the way that Karen Reed comes across and kind of holds herself, I think rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about what you guys are kind of finding because as we're update what's going on, but I just kind of want to keep thinking about, my thoughts on this case. The evidence, in my opinion, is so overwhelmingly in her favor, meaning I don't see how they have tried her a second time for murder. Like, I think
they've met their burden of beyond reasonable doubt because there's a lot of doubt.
A ton of doubt. And how the state prosecutor Brennan even thought about taking this case a second time blows my mind because I think it's just a giant taxpayer waste of money.
But to your point, if you're evaluating from just trying to be objective, and the one beauty of some of these video clips we see of people is it's not just a taken out of context photo, right? You see this in news articles a lot. Like Hillary Clinton on Fox News, they always post like the worst looking picture of Hillary Clinton, and same for liberal
news outlets. Is there a good picture of her?
I mean, there are better pictures, right? They always I swear they always get someone like sneezing, right? Or like it's always like the most awkward looking pictures. For this, when you look at her, do you think she's a likable defendant? And I know it sounds weird because she's on trial for murder. So,
are you talking about Hillary Clinton or Karen Reed?
Karen Reed. Okay. Like, because sometimes I feel like some of the initial videos I saw of her made her look like almost like she was overdressed and arrogant and like how I'd expect a celebrity to dress.
I see what you're saying there. And yeah, to some degree, yeah. I mean, are they overdressing her? I don't think so because you have to look professional in court. But yeah, I see what you're saying.
And I'm not saying she was overdressed. We wonder about the optics of how your client comes off to a jury, right? And we deal with this a lot. And again, murder trial, very different than a civil trial in some regards. But you would think like, is that jury? Because we know juries don't do rational things. I mean, a lot of times they'll talk about how the suits the attorneys were wearing. I mean, or the shoes, the things the judge tells them, exclude that from evidence. Don't take that into account. They take into full account, right?
The cars they're driving in the parking lots. I mean, that's all relevant because it's just bias forming. to the jury, right? And of course, they're trying to eliminate any and all bias so that any opinion is objective, but that's what we do. I mean, there are juries are trier of fact.
And then
they're judging everything.
And as we tell our stories, we're trying to bias them against the defendant. I mean, it is what it is.
It is what it is. So absolutely. So to answer your question, yes, I don't think she's super likable.
Yeah.
I don't think she's super likable. And I think they know that. I think Alan Jackson and Alessi, I think they know that. And they're doing their best to deal with what they have, which make her look nice. Don't let her talk. Apparently she's got a really weird accent. I'm surprised that they're allowing her to speak to media when they come out of the courtroom. I am surprised about that. I don't know if you guys have noticed that or seen that, but to me, I would just shut up.
Well, or are they assuming that all of the jurors are upholding their duty
to not
watch the...
Which is also a bit presumptuous because I can't believe that's happening.
I just don't think any of them are. I mean, I know that's a rule. I'm sure there's the honest Abes out there that adhere to those rules strictly, but that's our biggest worry, right?
Yeah,
is that they're all, I mean, we've had cases like this where we said, look, there's a lot of stuff on social media that our clients put out there that the judge shouldn't allow into evidence. So we're not worried about it as an evidentiary issue. We're worried about our jurors Googling our client.
Well, 1,000%, but also then we're also worried about defense lawyers saying, look at this photo of social media, and then it's like objection, but they've already seen it.
They've already seen it.
And so as soon as, and I don't think that's fair, but that it happens.
Yeah.
Once they've seen it, they've seen it. So to me, I'm just shocked that they're allowing her to talk because and you don't know what she's going to say.
Yeah.
I mean, the documentary that they did and that she did with, I believe it was HBO. Was it HBO? I want to say. But anyways, the documentary they did, I don't think it helped her.
No, and I don't think it ever helps.
It may have even led to like maybe the prosecutor feeling a little bit emboldened to do the second trial.
Well, and if she changes her story or anything, like you almost, in my opinion, you want to limit as much as you can because you don't ever want the moment of, well, you said something on this show different than what you said today, and all of a sudden the jury starts saying, maybe she's lying. Why is the story changing? Even if it's such a minuscule fact, that's your worst fear.
Absolutely. It forms a bias, potentially. So I'm just shocked. But anyways, update on the Karen Read trial. The prosecution just rest last week. So now it's the defense's turn. Okay. So everything that we've been watching on social media, TikTok and everything, court TV, that's all been the prosecution's case in chief. They've been presenting their case. They've been putting their witnesses on the stand. They've been kind of directing, right, the way that the trial goes with their witnesses that they've presented and whatnot. They've rested.
Yeah.
And now it's the defense's turn. So they started on Friday, Alan Jackson, and they started with a dog bite expert. And that's obviously clear. That's what they're really looking, right, to kind of hone in with the jury. Hey, there has to be another explanation to his death.
Yeah. You've got to, there's very few cases, and I mentioned this maybe in some of the prep here, there's very few cases where, as a defense on a big criminal trial, that you can't give them at least part of that doubt has to be who else could have done this. I mean, it can't just be, when I was trying to think of a good case, I mean, we always come back to the OJ Simpson trial because it's such a famous trial. A lot of people know. That's maybe the one trial where they didn't really ever give an alternative theory of, it was really based on the evidence doesn't add up to convict. It was never the argument that, well, it was the gardener or where it was this other person. They never gave the jury an alternative theory. In this one, we have some plausible alternative theories, I think, that help even more.
Well, they did, right? I mean, the OJ team did. I mean,
to some extent,
it's not talked about a lot, obviously, but they're obviously just suggesting that the glove in the OJ case belonged to somebody and fit somebody else.
Yeah,
because it didn't fit.
But
right?
they didn't ever actually point to like
fit,
this person was it, did they?
Well, I don't think they actually said who or what. They just obviously it had to be someone else.
It couldn't be him.
It couldn't be him.
I felt like the whole time it couldn't be him, but they never say, but it was. Look at this person whose hand is smaller, and you know what I mean.
Because
but here we have.
I think they're trying to suggest too that Nicole was nefarious and she was others and had whatever. But
I feel like here we do have enough alternate theories.
1,000%.
That now the defense can really just say, look, it could have been this, could have been this, could have been this. And any of those are at least plausible.
Yeah. And again, I think they're doing a good job because they know their burden, right? They know it's beyond a reasonable doubt. In criminal trials, it's beyond a reasonable doubt. So they know that they are creating as much doubt as possible by the alternate theory of dog bite, right? Or some
Fight
type
that
of
breaks out.
cause of death that, and I think I saw a comment from someone that it could have been like the dog could have gotten out and they let the dog out to go pee, and then the dog could have bitten the arm of Mr. O'Keefe outside. I don't think that's what happened, but I guess there's a number of alternate theories that are plausible at the very least. And so currently, and then of course all the Kelly Deaver stuff. If you guys have been watching, Kelly Deaver was on the stand, I think yesterday, I believe Monday, and that was a debacle, I think, because she was basically saying, well, I can't say what I want to say or should say. And then she tried to suggest that the defense was like, oh, you're going to threaten me with perjury. And then Alan Jackson was like, what are you talking about? Like, did any one of our team members like threaten you with perjury? Well, no. And so it just turned into, I think, just a disaster for the prosecution.
Yeah. Because it makes it look like it was them.
It just makes it look like it was them. And then she was, I mean, I think her testimony was essentially that, yeah, two of the key figures in the investigation were there in the Sallyport with the car and had access to key evidence that makes it look like what I feel like it is, a giant cover-up.
Yeah.
And so to me, I think Alan Jackson and Alessi are doing a fantastic job of just creating that doubt and creating this theory of, and I think everyone's on the same page. Goodness gracious. I mean, I think the entire nation is like, Karen Reed's innocent. You may or may not like her.
Yeah.
But she seems to be innocent. And then you've got Auntie Bev. We've talked about the judge.
Yeah.
Appointed, right? So she's appointed. And
what's your thoughts on appointed judges? I don't want to go on too much of a tangent, but I know we have a lot of places where judges are elected. We have a lot of places where they're appointed. What's your kind of thoughts there?
It cuts both ways, right? Because when they're appointed, it's political. Who's related to who's doing favors for who. So then there's obviously some immediate, like, how'd you get there?
Now, I don't know why because our Supreme Court is appointed, even though it have to be confirmed in a very different process than state judges, but I don't know why I've always leaned that way, and maybe it was more just because Utah we deal with appointed judges.
You're hoping that the appointments are based on merit.
Yeah.
Right? That they've held a position of, whether it being a prosecutor, a former defense lawyer, or civil trial lawyer or something, right?
Yeah.
You have the ability to be a good judge, and there's merit. It's merit based.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the hope behind appointments.
Yeah.
And I think Utah are appointments.
They're all appointments.
But with elections, I also see that there's good reason, because then you're not playing the political game, and there's always the wonder of how they got there, and is it fair, and is it merit-based?
Yeah, and this is always the worry, right? Like, so for example, in Utah, like some of our biggest firms are defense firms, right? And so if we had elected judges, if those defense firms had a part in the election campaign of said judges, that's my biggest worry in a lot of, now in criminal, it might be a little different because
totally
prosecution are, they're not so wealthy that they're making large contributions. And I don't think your average defense attorney is. Now, maybe a bigger defense firms could be, but I just have never liked the idea of it feels way more
pay to play. Yeah. I mean, that's the other risk on the election, right? Is hopefully that the election appointed or the elected judges are there because more people have seen that they should be there.
Yeah, especially if they're reelected and
they're voted in, and there's a good track record. But then we also know that it's pay to play.
Yeah.
And then who's doing all the donations and who's pushing and who's the lobbyist behind it. And so, I mean, it is what it is.
So in this case, Judge Bev is appointed.
Auntie Bev. I think that's what everyone has. I think that's what social media is referred to.
Auntie Bev.
And I kind of feel like, and I don't know if you guys feel the same way. I feel like the social media, I mean, I think there's been an Auntie Bev onslaught of criticism. I feel like it's getting to her. You don't see her rolling her eyes as much. You don't see her like shutting people down. I feel like some of the rulings she's made have been a little bit more defense friendly.
Well, in some cases, and you think of these, especially with televised cases, sometimes the judge feels very removed, unbiased, And in some of these cases, like, I can't remember the judge in the Johnny Depp trial, for example. I remember the defense attorney. She ended up kind of, or not the defense attorney, but the attorney for Johnny Depp really kind of played a prominent role. And I think everyone kind of felt like she was probably the most commanding attorney in the room for a lot of that. But in this case, it's very much the judge has made herself really part of the trial in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I don't remember the judge in that.
But you can't, right? And probably because they kept themselves out of it, let the parties kind of argue. And maybe some of that's the nature of civil versus criminal trials.
Or really the Gwyneth Paltrow case. I don't remember the judge in that case either.
And we watched a lot of that trial.
Yeah.
Because it was a Utah case.
Yeah. That's a great
point. It almost feels like she's interjected herself into the trial.
Yeah, it's like the referees in the Super Bowl that are making the game more about them and the calls and not letting the players play.
Yeah, that's exactly, I think, probably the internet's reaction to anti-Bev is like, come on, let the sides make their case as opposed to let the judge swing it for one team or the other.
Right, and let throw in a flag, like a non-PI call, that's going to decide the game. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
And I maybe she's starting to feel it.
Yeah.
Because I think she's becoming less of the focus than when it was when it started. So maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Maybe there'll be like some fairness after all. But that's where we're at currently.
Yeah.
Karen Reed's defense team they're putting on their case. They're doing their witnesses. They called a dog bite expert. I think it went okay for them. I don't know. I read some of the transcript and some of it was like, oh, that didn't go as good, maybe as well as they were hoping. And then Deaver, and so it'll be interesting to see who they call. Apparently they go for like another couple weeks.
Yeah.
On their witness list and see where this trial goes. At the moment, it looks like a massive cover-up still. And we'll see how that goes. So stay tuned in, please, because we're going to continue to update it as it continues. There's just a lot of interest nationwide. It's fascinating. So let's jump right in now to the Idaho 4, because it feels like there's, along with Karen Reed, Johnny Depp, Baldoni and Lively, and Reynolds, this one also has a ton of national news and media and following. TikTok is going crazy. Idaho 4, Bryan Kohberger. I think it's Bryan
Kohberger.
Kohberger.
I think this is the one that this could be a huge dud social media wise because we don't get cameras in the room.
Yeah,
that's the one thing I keep wanting. Now,
well, the trial hasn't started.
Close case
trial hasn't started. Trial starts in August.
But I'm saying they're not going to have, my understanding is there's not going to be video in the courtroom.
Yeah, I'm not sure on that yet.
That's my understanding.
But we haven't seen anything to date.
We haven't seen anything to date. But pieces of evidence have been coming out. There's been quite a few. Not only has the social media been alive and well with researching this case because it's interesting, but it's also been...
Well, the 911 calls, transcripts have been released.
Yeah.
The call's been released.
The video of his car.
Of the car. I mean,
so maybe we do a quick recap for anyone that's maybe not familiar with it.
So Idaho 4, the 4 students that were slain, stabbed to death in their off-campus house while attending the University of Idaho.
Yeah, Madison Mogan, Kaylee Gonzalez, Zaina Kernodle. That's an interesting name, Kernodle.
Kernodle, that's how I say it.
Ethan Chapin.
Yeah.
So one male victim, the other 3 females.
Macy and, is it Madison?
Madison. Kaylee and Madison.
Kaylee and Madison were best friends, and Xana and Ethan were dating. And then there were 2 others. So apparently there are 5 roommates that live in that house.
Yep.
And Ethan was over, so spending the night with Xana.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of a wild, I mean,
and prior to this, so even setting the stage, so to speak, Bryan Kohberger is a criminal justice.
I think he's getting his master's in criminal justice.
Yeah.
Criminology. He has a master's in criminal justice and has a degree, and he's attending Washington State University.
No, University of Idaho.
Brian's not attending University of Idaho.
Oh, he's not.
The students are. Brian's attending Washington State University, but only lives 8 miles from the home.
Okay.
So they're on the border of Washington and Idaho. So Washington State's eastern Washington, and the University of Idaho is western Idaho.
Okay.
So he doesn't live very far. So the question is, and this is something that's really important in this case, and I think the prosecutors will have to figure this out, and maybe it will come out eventually when the trial starts in August. The biggest issue is motive.
Yeah.
What is the motive?
And doesn't he give you kind of the Ted Bundy vibes a little bit? Like, again, Ted Bundy's a law student. He's a master's or PhD candidate.
In fact, there is evidence that shows that Bryan Kohberger was watching YouTube videos about Ted Bundy.
Yeah, and it even looks
murder prior to being arrested.
Yeah, I mean, that's, like I said, he totally gives those vibes, especially, and again, it adds fuel when he actually searched those things. But it does and maybe this is the fascination. Not only is the murder brutal for people, but then the
there's police sirens
perpetrator
in the background right now. Is that kind of creepy?
That's kind of fitting.
It's kind of eerie.
They probably can't hear it with the audio, but just so for those listening and not watching or whatever.
Just hear police sirens in your ear. That's what we're hearing.
But he gives you that this is an intelligent killer. This is someone at least, and again,
smart. Criminology and criminal justice knows maybe,
degree.
How to get away with murder, right? If you haven't ever seen that show, How to Get Away with Murder, he probably knew. And then he did an Amazon search for the knife that they had found there on the scene.
The K-bar knife.
The K-bar knife. And so...
Or they found the sheath, right? They found the sheath of the K-bar knife.
Right.
Which I didn't know this until we were kind of researching this, but... Because I just kept thinking they must have mashed it with this. But I didn't know that a K-bar knife, the sheath actually says K-bar, tells you exactly what type of knife it was that was used in these murders.
Right. So quick summary. We keep going off on tangents. 3 roommates, 1 boyfriend murdered. Okay. 2 survivors that were in the home. And allegedly they're murdered around 4:15 to 4:20 in the morning.
Yep.
Okay. After a night of all of them being out and
they'd all been to social events
that night, and still some of them were still even up at the time that the incident, that the murders took place. And then we have the car that had been, like you mentioned, the videos driving around the house and then taking off from the house. The cell phones had pinged numerous times on his cell phone, but his cell phone was turned off.
But he'd visited that specific home 12 times.
12 times prior to the murders.
Yeah.
Then he's, seen leaving Idaho and driving home. I think he's from Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And then going across country. And I think we all saw the video of the officer stopping he and his dad.
Yeah.
Somewhere in middle America.
Yeah.
Like Indiana or something like that.
Yeah.
So then they finally get DNA evidence they found in the trash and they link it back to that. I don't know if it was the sheath or they found a button of the knife ending, like the handle of the knife.
I can't remember which. We'll have to.
But they were able to link DNA evidence found on the scene at the scene to Bryan Kohberger. Okay. Now this is something really interesting because I don't know. There's a show out there on Apple TV right now. I don't know if you guys have been watching it. It's Friends and Neighbors with John Hamm. Have you seen that recently?
I haven't watched it.
It's actually pretty good. It's interesting. It's like a weird midlife crisis type of thing, like suburbs, like country club. What am I doing with my life? Because he's like a hedge fund guy, gets fired, and then he turns into a criminal and starts stealing high end watches and art from all of his rich neighbors. So it's a really interesting show. But one thing that was interesting in that show is because then he gets framed. Well, I don't want to say too much. He gets charged with murder, and one of the cops is seen digging through the trash for DNA evidence. And that's what happened here in the Kohberger Idaho 4 murders, is how they linked his DNA to the scene, was officers were going through his trash in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Now, apparently there's video or photo evidence of him coming out of his house with surgical gloves on, to avoid DNA on his hands, and then putting the trash in the neighbors' trash bins.
Okay.
To kind of hey, it's not our trash, it's their trash.
Well, and maybe he's not as, anyone that murders somebody's not as smart, but he's not as, maybe he should have finished his degree first to really get away with it.
Yeah, that's true. Way too soon.
Yeah. Don't do this when you're a master's candidate. You definitely need to wait until you've
you
graduated.
To have your master's for sure before you start killing people.
I guess, kind of what's the show? Dexter vibes, right? Wait until you've been in the field a while before you figure this out.
You're not wrong. But one thing I wonder if you guys, I know the answer, but I wonder if a lot of people are how could they go through your trash to get DNA?
Yeah.
And that's kind of an important legal question because there was a Supreme Court ruling, United States Supreme Court ruling that said once you kind of put your trash out in the garbage cans or trash bins, whatever you call them, out in front of your house, you lose that expectation of privacy.
Yeah.
So they can't come into your home and search for your trash.
And they can't come into your home. Can't come into the
without a search warrant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't come into like your backyard, and they can't set up a camera like peeking inside your windows
because you have an expectation of privacy to those areas without a search warrant.
But as soon as you dump it to the trash man for them to come pick it up,
it becomes kind of like public.
Yeah. Public domain.
Yeah. Sure. But you'd lose
the idea is that let's skip the step of like making the law enforcement camp out at the landfill. As soon as it's out there, there's not an expectation of privacy once you've let the
and so you lose that protection.
Yeah.
And so they can grab it, they can do the testing that they want to do on it, and that they obviously what they did here with Bryan Kohberger is found the DNA, which led to the arrest of him in Pennsylvania, and then he was extradited to Idaho.
Yep.
So, and of course he's entered not guilty pleas. That's kind of where they're at, and then the trial's scheduled to start in August. So what I find interesting, and I'm curious about what you think, and I'm curious about what our viewers and listeners are thinking. Now there's a conspiracy that he might not have acted alone. One, and then two, there's a conspiracy going around that somehow that maybe the surviving roommates are involved or had a role as well. Because what's really interesting is the 911 call transcripts. Have you gone over them yet?
I haven't gone over the transcripts of the 911 call. Tell me about that.
It's odd. I mean, it is odd. Now, first of all, the murders were horrific, right?
Yeah.
From all accounts, at least what I recall when it first happened, and I haven't really seen anything since, but I recall and maybe it was media driven. So let me put that in perspective.
Yeah.
But that when the police arrived on scene, like that, it was so bloody that there was like blood coming out of like the sides of the house and like on the foundation and the concrete, and like it was so like so gnarly. And so in my mind, of course, I didn't see photos, but in my mind, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, like what type of like murder scene of these four individuals?
Like a Hitchcockian, blood splatter,
totally, just like
everywhere,
just nasty, right? The horrible. But the 911 call that this was just released not long ago, says that the two surviving, Dylan Murdaugh,
I can't remember the survivor.
Anyways, Dylan.
Yeah.
And then, is it Bethany? What's the names? Dylan and Bethany?
I can't remember the two surviving.
I don't know if we have it on our little sheet, our little cheat sheet, but I think it's Bethany. So Dylan and Bethany are up at the same time. Okay. Bethany, right? Dylan and Bethany. Thank you. Thank you for our offsite producer helping us out with that. So, but what's crazy is they're awake and they're texting each other. Hey, I think there's someone in the house. I saw a man with a mask.
Yeah.
And then they text each other back like, what the heck? Or shut the F up, right? Get down here. Come down here. Like, and then when someone, I think it was Dylan to Bethany, like run, like, so they're awake and they're hearing things. But what's odd is that the police don't get, and this is happening like at 4:15 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. 4:20, I think the video shows
the
Hyundai Elantra. I heard someone say in the video that Elantra. I've never heard. Well, how do you say Hyundai Elantra?
I've always said Elantra.
Elantra?
Hyundai like Sunday and then Elantra.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's just interesting.
Maybe on a different part of the country. It's
Hyundai Elantra. And I was like, what's an Elantra? Anyways, so the Hyundai Elantra is like in the video speeding away at 4:20, right?
Yeah.
They don't call the cops. They don't call the police until about 11:50
the next day.
Well, the same day. But what is that?
5 hours, 6 hours
later.
Now that is, again, especially if you saw someone in the house.
Well, I mean, so I can reconcile that in my mind that they're freaked out because they do text each other, "Hey, I'm freaked out."
But if you're freaked out and you're actually freaked out, why would 911?
They're 911, or I can see them hiding, right? So they're hiding, or maybe they're trying to be quiet, but you still be like, "What?
Yeah,
what's your emergency? We think someone's in the house, right?"
Yeah, that's
logical to me.
That's the oddest fact, I think. Not the oddest, but that's one of them.
Can you then associate fear and shock to that? Okay, maybe, right? I'm not going to rule it out. But then in the transcript, when now it's hours later, it's light out, presumably, right? Yeah. It's almost noon. And clearly there's no noises in the house. You'd almost like maybe with a bat, or if they don't have a bat or something, I don't know.
Yeah.
If they're together, you go start to check and see if anyone's still in the home, and maybe you still call 911. Now, I haven't seen toxicology reports of the decedents, and I haven't seen toxicology reports of the survivors.
Yeah.
So maybe everyone's still like out of their minds on drugs or alcohol or whatever. Yeah. Okay.
They'd really party. If they'd partied the night before, they think they see something, but they're like, man, I'm wasted.
Well, even DoorDash came at like 4:10 or 4:12 for Xana. So it's possible that there's
now, do
marijuana.
They have that? Have you heard anything about the DoorDash driver?
No, I haven't seen anything. I thought that too, actually. But
because if I'm Bryan Kohberger, however you say his name, that's
one of your defenses.
That's one of your defenses. Like, hey, this guy was in the house, at the house, not moments before me. Now he has no reason for me there. It was Uber. He's delivering some food, but
now a DoorDash. If the DoorDash is verified, then you're gonna presume it's, and the food was delivered. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
deliver food to an apartment
like 4:12 a.m. Someone's got the munchies. Like, okay, so maybe.
So again, we don't know their state. We don't know their toxicology, but we can maybe make some assumptions at 4 a.m. when you're ordering DoorDash.
So they might not be in their right mind.
Yeah,
that's fair. That's fair to say.
College apartment,
and to call the police, and they're just like, they could be like, we're just high and we don't know what's happening, so why call the police, right?
And again, they might not suspect murder. Hey, someone was in the house, this was weird, but they don't know murder,
and they don't want to call the police because they're all high and doing illegal drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can kind of get behind that to some degree.
Yeah.
At noon, though, this is where I'm going. This is where my hang up a little bit. They say that Xana Reynolds is unconscious. And they call a couple friends over too, an Ethan and a Hunter, I think. Not Ethan, a Hunter and someone else. And they're friends and they live close by, and they come by because when they call 911, finally the phone is being passed around. Now it could be that they're freaking out and they're just seeing this scene for the first time of like, oh my gosh, and that's why the phone's being passed around. But it's odd that they're passing the phone around.
Yeah.
And the transcript's a little choppy, and the 911 dispatcher is like, is someone unconscious? Hello? Stop passing the phone around.
Yeah.
Is someone unconscious? Is that person breathing? Because they're looking at Xana.
Yeah.
And to me, that's where I'm like, wait, I thought this was like a massive bloodbath.
Yeah. Well, in one of the things that's come out, and I'll have to verify this, but it was that within that time frame, at some point, they've got a footprint when he would have sat down on a bed, like tired from all of the energy from murdering 4 people.
Right.
And so then you're like, if it's so blood-soaked that we've got a blood-soaked footprint and it really is this bloodbath, how did they not see it before? And how is that not like the first call, like 911, hey, there's blood everywhere.
True. Well, so the 2 best friends were up in the 3rd floor. They were in a room together. So it's possible they hadn't gone up to the 3rd floor and seen it. And I understand that was the worst of it.
Yeah.
And so it's also possible that maybe Xana only had one stab wound, and they couldn't see blood, because it's unclear from the transcript, and it's also unclear from any of what's come out whether she's face down, did she face up.
Well, and
I don't
think we know like how many stab wounds.
Right,
I don't think that's come out.
So it's possible,
and that will be things that come out of trial.
Right. So it is possible that what they're seeing, they just don't see a stab wound or any blood. That's possible.
Now, have we heard anything about, like, did he date anyone or know anyone in the house? Have we heard anything on that?
Well, the only thing that we do know is that he had been following, I think, 1 or 2 of them on Instagram for several weeks before, and had tried DMing 1 or 2 of them before.
Okay.
And
so we do know that.
And it's unclear whether they had like accepted it or even seen it, because it was like in those like friend requests, accept this invitation or whatever on Instagram. So it's possible they didn't even see it, but he was trying to reach out to them.
Yeah.
And they also have his cell phone in and around that house for weeks.
Yeah, I think up
and
to
at
12,
weird times.
Yeah, 12 times.
And either really late at night or early in the morning. So it's just weird.
Yeah.
So that's where it's like,
the evidence, at least that has been released so far, is very against him, in my opinion. There's very few theories that, like I said, we've talked about the one, again, the 911 delay is one of them that could sow some doubt. But for the most part, with the DNA evidence, the K-bar, his searches,
it doesn't look good for him.
It does not look good.
He looks guilty, for sure.
Okay.
So the conspiracies, I'm kind of still trying to figure, like reconcile where you would come up with that. Maybe not acting alone. Okay, maybe, but that just doesn't make sense. I just think it was a crime of passion. I think, and I don't know what you guys think, but I think he was just obsessed with one of them.
Yeah.
Or both, or a couple of them.
And to be able to snap to the degree, like, because someone had said, like, well, if he'd had a relationship with one of them, then it doesn't make sense why he would then kill the rest. But I think once you've snapped and crossed that line that you're willing to murder someone, I
don't think there's any chance he had a relationship with anyone.
Yeah.
There's just no chance.
I think it would. Well, and I think it would have came out.
Did he happen to cross paths with one of them and got scorned a bit, maybe at a party, or at a social event, or on campus somewhere? Because I haven't seen this, but let's not rule out that he's like potentially acted like he's a student at University of Idaho.
Yeah.
And maybe cross paths with one of them in the library or on campus or something, right? Somehow he became familiar with one of them and became obsessed.
Yeah.
And the allegations are from interviews of people that have known him in the past is that he was kind of bullied, kind of a weird, awkward social kid. He's been diagnosed with ASD, autism spectrum.
Yeah. And history of drug use, some drug use.
And then, of course, all the criminology stuff and the weird searches videos he's been watching. To me, he's cooked.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that's the motive.
Now, when you're cooked, do you anticipate him testifying?
That should be like a chapter. When you're cooked,
what do you do?
What do you do?
What do you do?
What's the strategy?
Because I love that, like, his defense attorneys are mounting the best defense because they want to withstand an appeal, right? Because your worst fear as a prosecution is if the defense half-asses it, then it's going to get overturned on appeal for ineffective assistance of counsel. Defense attorneys have a duty to give him the best possible defense under the laws.
Well, now they're starting to push the angle and the narrative of this is why the ASD is important. Now I'm blanking, like doesn't have the mental capacity.
Yeah.
So basically, they're doing a psych defense,
having him get evaluated, and
basically like I'm crazy, right? And then if you're crazy, you can't stand trial, you're not fit for trial.
Which again,
or insanity defense, right?
I think they're going to fail because again, he's a PhD student or a master's student,
right? So then how do you argue insanity or not mentally stable if he's currently in a master's program?
Yeah,
right. But I mean, just because you're smart doesn't mean you're not insane.
That's true. That's kind of the Ted Kaczynski genius.
Ted Bundy.
A lot of these guys, very brilliant minds, but crazy.
So I think sociopaths. I think that's what the defense is starting to like. That's the narrative. I think they're trying to put out there to some degree, and even in some of the filings and whatnot, that they're going to be presenting an insanity defense.
Yeah.
So,
do you think he takes the stand if it goes to trial?
So back to, is he cooked? And I don't think so.
Because this has been my opinion always, is when you're cooked, you have to take the stand. And unless you I heard this once from.
So if you're cooked, you take it because that may be the only way you uncook yourself?
Yes. And that's why I think Alex Murdaugh and we'll get into that in a different podcast, but in that case, he took the stand. OJ Simpson doesn't because his previous, beatings of Nicole and all that stuff would have come out and it would have cooked him more.
So my question then to you is, OJ acquitted, Murdaugh convicted.
But again, I think when you're the defense and you're like, my client's cooked, here's my Hail Mary.
Well, most people thought OJ was cooked and he got acquitted. He didn't take the stand. A lot of people, I think,
I know that it's a right. You have a right against having to take the stand in your own criminal trial, but I don't
know. Do you want an edit on that?
On what?
If you're cooked, you take the stand.
I think you have to. I think that's your only.
Well,
that's your only
examples
shot.
You gave. The one guy got acquitted for not when he didn't take the stand. The other guy did get convicted.
But I think that decision, and I've heard this on different things. His defensive team was still considering maybe putting him on the stand. OJ's. But I think by the time the prosecution was done and after the first bit of trial, I think they were more confident.
Yeah, I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just.
Because they did have him put on the glove. I mean, they did some demonstrative evidence with him. I mean, it wasn't like he just sat there the whole time.
That's true.
Demonstrative evidence was, I mean, let's face it, that's the thing everyone remembers. If the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. I think that was their best. I mean, I don't know. So again, if I'm Kohberger and all this mounting evidence against me, the only thing I see at this point that maybe shifts on that narrative is he takes the stand and has to give some sort of crazy
explanation.
Yeah, some sort of explanation.
I just don't. I don't know if it helps him, in my opinion.
No, and I think in most cases it doesn't. And most of the time when you hear, client spoke to the police, you're like, oh, that's the dumbest
thing. Did you do that?
Like,
because I mean, I can see it. Like, so what did you search this on Amazon?
Yeah, but I'm a criminology student, right? That's where it's going to get really interesting. Is
I'm a criminology student, so I searched knives on Amazon.
Yeah, like,
the same one that was found at the scene.
And like I said, I'm not saying I'm going to be the one that comes up with the defense for him because I think it's mounting against it. I'm just saying taking the stand.
I see what you're saying. I think I'm tracking, right? Like you have nothing to lose. Because at this point, you have everything to lose.
Because that's what I'm saying is I just think
when
you're cooked, that's what I'm saying is once because in some of these cases
we're writing two different chapters of when you're cooked, and the reason why is I think when you're cooked. That's what we should have
we should sell T-shirts. So.
When you're cooked,
when you're cooked,
don't do this or do this. When you're cooked, ...
Yeah.
So when you're cooked, ... From Tyler's perspective, you shut up.
You don't take the stand.
It doesn't help you. I'd rather, because if I'm on the jury of Bryan Kohberger and we're talking about Amazon, why you searched that, I'm only coming up with my own ideas. If I hear him say something why he did that, I'm gonna be like, bullshit. Like,
yeah, that's true.
Like
no, and I think you'd probably have a pretty good appeal that you did have him take the stand, right?
Because I don't think you murdered the Idaho 4 with a Coburn knife. What's it called?
K-bar.
I
always called it K-bar. Maybe it is
I'm pretty sure you didn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. So your explanation as to why you did an Amazon search doesn't make a ton of sense to me.
Yeah.
Right. Because I'm a criminology student.
Yeah.
If I heard that at trial, I'd be like, what does that have to do with it?
No. And again, I'm not saying that.
Well, I know, and I'm pretty sure you didn't do it. I'm
just saying, I feel like
you're not being charged with it either.
I know.
Yeah.
Not yet. Podcast release. When you're cooked.
When you're cooked, I'm not putting
it. And give all the reasons how I did it. But I just always think if I'm the juror and I know it's a right, we have this constitutional right not to have to take the stand in your own case. But I just always I've always felt like if you're innocent, you get up there and you testify. And I know that the instructions from the judge say otherwise and everything, you're not required to. We have this right against self-incrimination. But I've just always felt like there's very few cases, with the exception of OJ, where I just feel like if I'm a juror and this person's innocent, why don't they get up on the stand?
Yeah, you want to fight for yourself.
Even if the judge said, don't take that into consideration, the fact that the defendant doesn't get up and testify shouldn't be used against him. I believe most people think the opposite. That if they don't get up and say that they're innocent, they're not innocent.
Yeah, you're not wrong. I mean, that's when you're cooked, that's not a bad move.
Right. Like if all the evidence in there, and he'll be sitting through his own trial, but his defense attorneys have got to be like, everything against me. I just think that's the Hail Mary. And I don't think it pays off, because in Alex Murdaugh's case, it obviously didn't pay off. But was there anything that could have? No, him not testifying made it worse. In movies and in real life, we always hear, like, if you've ever been charged with a crime, what do? You don't say anything.
You plead the fifth.
Yeah.
Right?
Plead the fifth.
That's almost, we hear that just as much as when you're cooked, right? Plead the fifth. So when you're cooked,
I hope that this podcast episode is called "When You're Cooked."
Plead the fifth.
Plead the fifth.
But we do that. We plead the fifth.
Yeah.
You don't say anything. Don't talk to him. Don't say anything. Right.
Yeah.
Anytime I think anyone's ever been arrested, what do they say? I want a lawyer.
Yeah. Well, that's what they should say.
That's what they should say.
Most of the time,
a lot of people start talking. I don't know. But I want a lawyer. I want a lawyer. I want to talk to my lawyer. I'm not going to answer your question. I want to talk to my lawyer. What are they doing? They're pleading the fifth. Right. So I don't know. I like your analysis, though. It's a good one.
I'm just saying, if I'm sitting there with everything that's come out so far, and there's going to be a lot of more evidence that we don't know about. These are just the things that have kind of slipped out or through motions. But the more and more that comes out, it does not look good for Kohberger. And I think his only shot is to give some sort of alternative theory. And maybe they haven't shown that because, we didn't know about the bloody glove before on OJ Simpson either.
Right.
I mean, that came out during the prosecution's case in chief. So I don't know.
One thing I think you have to consider, and I think this is where the Bryan Kohberger case is going to go. It's not just a matter about conviction; it's also about sentencing.
Yeah, that's true. Because he is death on at least my understanding. They're seeking the death
prosecution
penalty.
is seeking the death penalty. So that may be like one of the reasons why he doesn't take the stand is because they don't want to make it worse for himself either in regards to sentencing.
Yeah, that's true.
So if he's found guilty, which I think everyone seems to think that's going to happen, and the evidence appears to be overwhelmingly in favor of finding him guilty, then it's a matter of sentencing.
Yeah. No, right? and I remember that I did have a law school professor that had done, at the time, at least my understanding was he had the record for most defenses of people up for capital murder.
Right.
In the state of Washington. And the big thing he said was most of the time my success was not whether or not I had gotten acquittal, because that rarely happens, but my success was, did I help them avoid the death penalty or not?
Or get minimized,
life in prison was a success for him as opposed to his client getting the death penalty. That was really the defense's goal. And that might be the case here.
Yeah, part of the factor that they might be considering in determining whether they want him to take the stand or not is how bad will you make it for yourself?
Yeah.
And then the judge in sentencing makes it like, whoa.
And that might be even the thing with pointing to some of the mental issues is, hey, this isn't to show that he didn't have the ability to think about the crimes he was committing, but maybe, again, still towards that point, like you said, this is more the sentencing of, hey, this person suffered from autism or was on the scale. And
hence
some of these things that, again, it might not mean that he doesn't spend the rest of his life in prison, but maybe doesn't get the death penalty.
But doesn't get the death penalty. So that could be a factor.
That could be a factor.
Anyways, it's going to be super interesting. It's only 2 months away when this trial starts. I'm curious to see what the defense lawyers come up with in regards to motive. And that's an important factor, right? What's the motive? And sometimes juries don't like to convict on murder charges if they don't feel like there's a good motive.
Yeah.
But I think that's going to come out that there's enough evidence showing that he was obsessed with one of them.
And his search history is going to crucify him.
And you don't have to have a motive to show that, to commit something. I mean, murder, especially if you're crazy and you're obsessed and you're scorned or whatever it might be. And that is motive. I mean, that in and of itself is motive.
Yeah.
You're killing out of you're being disgruntled.
Yeah.
Because you just don't see things the right way and you're just crazy, for lack of a better way of saying it.
And I remember reading an article once that was talking about the difference between first and second degree murder in a lot of states. Was first degree was premeditated and second degree was heat of passion.
Yeah.
And
manslaughter. Yeah.
But the article was like, at least the person in first degree murder had a reason and thought about it. But the person in second degree that just lashes out and murders someone, they're like, that person's more dangerous than the person who at least had his wife was cheating on him. He thought about it. He planned it. The article at least was making the case that
it should be
the
flipped.
person that randomly murders someone in the passion, that's worse.
Yeah.
That person is worse for society than at least the other person had some thought process into it.
And it's directed at an individual. The public at large is not at danger.
Yeah. Versus the heat of passion is like some slight in the heat of passion. You murder someone. Right. That person's a lot worse.
In a bar fight or something like that. Yeah.
Some heat of passion, even though in sentencing and different things, that person who seems more dangerous got off.
That's a great point. I mean, it's so true. Because that's really what the prosecution, that's what they're trying to do. They're trying to inherently protect the community and the public and the communities in which they live. And so, they take their job seriously and they should. Yeah. But that's a great point as to that maybe it should be reversed.
Yeah, because again, and that's, if you're trying to lower those charges, the premeditated versus he's crazy. This was he was obsessed and these other things. Again, a lot of our sentencing does diminish it to some degree on the severity, which again, the 4 combined still might not save him from the death penalty. But
and the parents, in this case have been quite vocal, and they should be. Yeah. If I can't imagine what the parents of those 4 are going through, and they want justice and they're entitled to it, and they hopefully they get it.
Yeah.
And that's something that's obviously important to us and all the things that we do, because everything that we do to fight for our clients is for justice. For justice for them and the parents and family members of those that were killed, the 4. Justice is the murderer goes to jail.
Is convicted.
And is convicted. Yeah. And potentially the death penalty. I don't know where you stand on that, but I'm not opposed to it because...
Especially, I almost think sometimes, and I don't think they consider this, but I always think they should, is what do the families want? Are the families for death? Because I think some people are like, death's too easy. I'd rather them rot in prison the rest of their life.
I mean, it goes, I can see it all the ways, but that's justice for them.
For them. And I think that should, more than what we think of justice or someone that, I always think the family's idea of what, and there might not be consensus amongst four, because there's 4 victims here, but what do they think?
It's hard to say. I mean, they might have different opinions as to...
And that might be some of the plea negotiations that maybe go on with the prosecution. Is my guess is while they're still pushing is that the family support, that they want to keep pushing for the death penalty.
Yeah, I'm curious how the family thinks, what the families think about that. But that's justice for them, right? Yeah. And then justice for us and for our clients and injury, for injury law and civil tort, what's called tort law, but is money, because that's the only way that we can really like compensate our clients for the wrongs and the damages they've gone through and injuries that they're dealing with, right? So it's really interesting, the parallels between civil justice and criminal justice, and how trials work in the criminal court system and the civil court system, and what we have to deal with juries and witnesses, and when you're cooked, do you testify, not testify?
And luckily most of our plaintiffs are not cooked.
No.
But we've had some depositions go terribly before for our clients, and there's no amount of prep that could have fixed that. I mean, it just is what it is. But they're not cooked the way that he's cooked, but they are. It
cooks their cases sometimes. Sometimes their cases can be cooked, depending on what you post on social media or what you may say to adjusters or what. So
or they cooked their own case.
Yeah, you cook your own case. Don't cook your own case. But anyways, it's super interesting. So stay tuned in, please. Like us, follow us, subscribe to the podcast. Hopefully this has been insightful and entertaining. It's just fascinating. And so at the very least, we find it fascinating. We'd love to talk about it and share our opinions with you guys. So until next time, hopefully stay classy, but stay safe.